Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alchemize with Alanna. Or if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the conversation. And this show is called Alchemize because that's what we do here. We take what feels messy, confusing, or noisy in your life or your business and turn it into something meaningful and productive. I'm a very practical person, and my approach to coaching is also practical. So although each conversation I have is about transformation, it's not in a lofty way, but in the real honest sense of learning, like how to hear yourself again and make choices that are true to you. Today's topic is one that hits home for many of us, learning how to tune out the noise so that you can actually tune in to yourself. We live in a world where everyone has an opinion. Notifications are nonstop, and it's easy to get lost in the volume of it all. But leadership, business, or even just living well, all of it requires for you to learn how to listen differently. So today I'm joined by someone who embodies that kind of intuitive leadership and approaches things with logic, amongst other valuable traits. Elizabeth Morris, founder of the Nail Hub, an award-winning business helping salon professionals master both craft and business. Liz and her husband also recently launched their own product line called Attain, which is all about helping people reach their goals with integrity and balance. She has a brilliant business mind. She's a truth teller and someone who has built her success by knowing when to block out the noise and follow her gut. So Liz, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alanna. Thank you so much.
So good to have you here.
Yeah, same. I'm very excited about this.
Awesome. Well, and apart from what I've shared, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience about yourself that I haven't yet? Or
Not
related?
really. I mean, that was a great intro. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for almost 15 years now. I didn't start as an entrepreneur. I actually started in corporate America. And so the entrepreneurial journey definitely brings its own unique challenges. And I'm really excited to talk about some of those challenges and how what you do and what you talk about and what you investigate really helps with all of that.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, and audience, as Liz and I have this conversation, I always encourage comments or questions because we can riff off of those and we can address them in real time. Or if you're catching this recording after the fact, I'll always come back and check for comments too. So before we dive in, on that note, I love to pose questions to you for those that are watching. So audience, can you recall a time that you ignored your intuition? What did it have to do with? Was it a relationship, a job, a new hire? Maybe it was a business decision. So maybe the intuition necessarily wasn't clear, but you second guessed it. Drop it in the chat. No judgment. We're just here to share reflections. So the first topic is around understanding intuitive listening. So Liz, this is where I want to start. So people often hear the term trust your gut, but they don't actually know how to do that. So how do you personally define intuitive listening, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, for sure. And forgive me if I look down because I also wanted to, I wrote down some notes before we started today. But one of the biggest things that I have experienced as an entrepreneur is what a lot of people refer to as analysis paralysis. So that's actually one of the things that I find self-awareness really helps with really kind of getting more in tune with what you actually want to do, really being able to do intuitive listening, like you said. To me, the analysis paralysis thing is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck on, where it's maybe we don't know how to make a decision with our gut, or we don't have the confidence to move forward with just feeling like we want to do something. So then you get fixated on, well, let me see if data will tell me which way to go, right? Which way the cards are gonna fall. And that for me is something that as an analytical person, I find is helpful, but it can also be something where I have to be self-aware enough about my analysis paralysis that I know is part of my personality to really then go, okay, the data is telling me this, that supports my decision perhaps, But at the end of the day, what do I really feel like doing with my time and my energy? Because as an entrepreneur, it's not just about always making the right decision for your business. It's not just about data. It's also about feeling good with the way that you're spending all of your time and energy, because that's ultimately what we end up doing mostly as entrepreneurs.
That's an interesting thing to bring up because, first of all, sometimes data is not accurate. Sometimes you don't have enough of it. And sometimes just because you have that data, it will steer you in a direction that your intuitive sense is saying, wait a second, although it's telling me this, there might be something else there that you can be open to that no data can tell you about.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. But the analysis paralysis, I see that happen a lot. That stops business owners or senior leaders making effective decisions and quickly. That's another thing is you might not always have time to collect the data that you really need or that you're desiring, and a decision needs to be made more quickly. So, and on that note too, so can you share a moment in your business or your life when intuition guided you toward an unexpected but better decision?
Yeah, there's quite a few, especially, obviously having hindsight at 2020, there's quite a few of them. But I would say one of the biggest scenarios that I got into was a couple of years ago, where our business had matured to a certain level, a certain age, certain revenue size. And what ends up happening when you get to that is you just become a target for all types of people, to, all kinds of experts to start reaching out to you and saying, hey, let me help you grow. Let me help you do this. Let me help you branch into what a business of your size should actually be doing. And what was interesting was I felt that pressure about kind of keeping up with my business and kind of following the typical ladders or hierarchies that I assumed were part of what I should be doing. So, maybe you're a startup, you're super small, then you hit certain revenue metrics, and then all of a sudden people are trying to tell you you're a business of a certain size now, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And I had that during a kind of rebrand. We were with the same branding, same logo, same vibe for many years. And I decided I wanted to mature that and modernize it a little bit. And so I went through this journey with a marketing advertising agency as well as a branding agency to help me do all of that. And although the results of it were on net positive, I would say that having that experience where all of a sudden I've got a lot of opinions, I've got a lot of expert in, whether it's in quotations or not, opinions about my business and what I should be doing and how I should be representing it. That was a period of time where I lost the connection. Oddly enough, I lost the connection with my business in rebranding it and kind of coming up with the next, evolution of it. And that was something that took me a while to get back to. And that's also one of those lessons that really taught me a lot about staying true to what you ultimately want your business to be like, because you are going to have people who are, you're going to have lots of cooks in the kitchen at some point. And to me, that is where you really need to take a step back and say, hey, everybody, thanks for all of your input. I need time to actually think about this instead of feeling pressured to just go with whatever some quote unquote expert is telling you to do.
I've been through that myself where I had coaches or marketing experts tell me to do certain things that didn't really align to who I am. But they're like, well, this is what you need to do, right, to go to that next level. And it didn't really have the impact that I wanted it to. And although, yes, I might have gotten a client or two out of it, it didn't feel right for me. And I wish I had listened to my instinct because during that period of time, lessons learned, right? There's never any regret. Although at the time it kind of felt like I was wasting time. But to your point too, that my last Alchemize with Alanna was actually with another client that I've had for many years who faced the same thing in terms of always being encouraged to grow. Like, oh, so you've reached this certain revenue point. Now you need to grow further than that. And here's what you need to do to get there. But there's no magic formula. Yes, there are certain things that you can do that usually transpire into results, but there's no one size fits all for this. even if it's in the same industry. That's what I've experienced for myself in terms of coaching, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, there's just it's similar to a lot of other pressures that I think entrepreneurs face, but I would argue that it's kind of the imposter syndrome starts to rear its ugly head. You know, when you start to get so many people telling you their opinions and thoughts about the business that you've built, right? Because for the most part, I mean, every business is different, but for me, for example, my business, I have always been basically a one-woman show. I'm the face of my business. I'm the name that's known for my business. You know, my business and my personal reputation are very closely tied together. And I've built, you know, very meaningful relationships with my customer base, with my follower base, all of that. And so to take something that's so personal and really tied very closely to me as a person, and then have people kind of quote unquote like judge you and kind of, you know, look under the hood and go, oh, well, I think you should have done this differently, or this is what I think you should do going forward. It's interesting because your insecurities about all of the stuff that you've built can really start to come forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, you know, you've also taught me a lot about that, which is, you know, really kind of listening instead of getting up in your head about it, really listening to what your heart is telling you, how you feel about things, making sure that that alignment stays intact. Because when you are kind of getting that sort of judgment from others, that can come, you know, as advice or whatever you want. To me, that really brought forward a lot of the insecurities that I didn't know I even had, because I was so busy grinding and building my business. I wasn't even thinking about really anything other than that. And then when you've got people that are, you know, maybe peers or experts or professionals that do this for a living, and they start to tell you, you know, hey, I'm not super impressed with what you've done here. I think you need to do more in this area in order to grow. That for me was something that hit me pretty personally, because my business and I are, you know, again, tied very closely. So I think that was something that really taught me a lot about, again, staying true to how I felt, what I wanted, what my own vision was, and also being open-minded enough to take on some of that advice, finding efficiencies, learning how to do things better than I had done them before, but not allowing people to completely derail what I am or who my business is or any of that.
Yeah, because of the way that they think you should do it, or the direction that they think you should go in, when it's not their business.
Right.
And I just to really, when you say you taught me that, so really quickly for those watching, I had the pleasure of working with Liz for about a year. And in terms of listening to the heart, which might sound, you know, woo-woo or super emotional, more information, the science of the heart is pretty amazing. That there's what's called heart's intelligence, and there's more information travels from our heart to our brain than from our brain to our heart, and they're very much connected. And so that's part of a little bit of the work that I'll do with clients sometimes to help you get connected to your heart, so that you can tap into your heart's intelligence and help make more effective decisions. Talk about being true to yourself. And I just want to one of the comments from Wendy, you know, she said it's hard to refocus, or self-focus is so difficult. Yeah, it absolutely can be, especially when you have all this noise distracting you, some with, you know, positive intent, but, you know, it's the practice of discernment and being able to discern, you know, what feels right for me, what doesn't, and just kind of thank them for the advice anyway, right? So you said something earlier about data and being logical. And I'm a pretty logical person too. But for people who have learned to rely on logic or data mostly, how can they start reconnecting with that intuitive voice? Like, it's not about dismissing the importance of the data or logic, because both can be important, but to just, you know, to have a stronger intuition.
I think, well, I'll share kind of the things that I did. And again, you taught me so many concepts about how to find that alignment. I like what you said about it can feel woo-woo, because again, I am a very analytical, logic-driven person. You know, I always joke with people that I run on binary, ones and zeros. There's nothing in between.
Saying that, yeah.
One or zero. And it's interesting because when you have that type of personality, anything outside of those extremes can feel very odd and very uncomfortable. And I would argue that truly, in order to get back to that intuitive listening and to really understand what that meant and be able to hear my heart over my brain, and also to, make that connection, because let me back up for a second. When I actually started to look for someone to help me with this problem, what was interesting was, as an analytical person, I started looking for an expert that could help me with business logistics. And you and I actually randomly met each other at a conference that I wasn't even attending myself. I was just there with my husband. And I remember you talking about alignment, and we kind of started talking, and I remember, we started working together, and here I am thinking that you're going to give me this completely overhauled business plan, and everything's going to be about execution, and everything's going to be about all of these different things that I need to do. And what really came out of us working together was you taught me about how to actually get to know myself a little bit better, and how to actually prioritize the things I wanted for myself and also therefore wanted for my business. And that was something very different than a 1 and 0 strategy or a logistical strategy. What I found was, the more in tune I got with how I was feeling, the direction I wanted to go, the kind of brand I wanted to build, the kind of reputation and legacy I wanted to leave behind, instead of focusing on metrics, instead of focusing on, followers and what my competition was doing and all of that. Once I started focusing on the legacy I really wanted to leave behind by the business I built, I started to actually, even to the extent of writing down in my notebook, or, my notes on my computer, really talking about what are my actual priorities when it comes to the work, Liz. And that was something, honestly, that I hadn't probably ever done, because the moment I started as an entrepreneur, and I think most entrepreneurs can relate to this, you're just grinding. I mean, you don't even have time. I remember there was a time period where I lived on Coca-Cola. I mean, I literally woke up like at the crack of dawn. I was like a hummingbird. I lived on like processed sugar all day and caffeine, and then, would go to bed at 11 o'clock at night and still have a brain full of stuff that I needed to do the next day. And so you don't really have time to sit there and go, how do I feel about this? Like, what do I really want to do with my business? You're just trying to actually make money, move forward, and grow and grow and grow. And then I would say there's that maturity phase of your business where you reach a certain level, maybe you're either sick of the way you're doing it, you're getting burned out by that lifestyle, which was part of my problem. I started getting really burned out. I started losing the motivation to work on my business.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was so demotivated. I mean, like, I literally was ready to light my business on fire and drive off into the sunset a year and a half ago. And it was because I was so focused on the grind that what my brain was telling me I needed to do for my business was so far separated from what I actually felt in my heart, or in your soul, or whatever you want to call it, that those two things were so disconnected that no wonder you're going to lack motivation. No wonder you're going to feel stressed out. No wonder you're going to feel like you don't even recognize yourself, or you don't even recognize your business. And that's also, to me, where imposter syndrome truly comes from, is that disconnection, because you don't feel like you actually are the driver behind the wheel on your business anymore, because you just, your vision is completely gone. So those things, if you can get back to honestly sitting with yourself, carving out some quiet time, even if it was like 15 minutes in the morning while I drank coffee, I would actually start to practice writing down what my personal priorities were, and the things I wanted to spend my time and energy on, instead of just getting into the buzz of my day and just feeling very frazzled and, I got to get all these tasks done. So that really helped me, is kind of just sitting with it, writing things down, actually learning how to listen to yourself and actually come up with those ideas on your own. And then allowing those things to become priorities over some of the typical stuff that you've been prioritizing. That really changed my entire business and everything that I've done for the last 1.5 to 2 years.
Beautiful. Well, and I want to applaud you because you didn't just write it down. Some people write that stuff down all the time, but then they take no action on it. And then what I also heard and what you were talking about, and I get this a lot from the clients that I work with. I don't know, maybe it's a characteristic of the audience that I tend to attract, is the grind. I'm tired of this. The like, how did I get here? And it's like, okay, well, what do you want? And it's maybe it's just asking questions that they don't know to ask of themselves, or you don't know to ask yourself, or no one else has asked you those questions. And then you get to hear yourself say things out loud, apart from just writing stuff down, is super important. And then to have somebody who's objective, it's not my opinion, right? Because I just want to support you and where you say you want to go. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do about it once you say it out loud, right? But okay, well, let's move into the second topic, because this is a nice segue to that, which is how to get quiet and to be able to hear your truth. So, audience, where in your life could you create more silence or space for yourself this week? Even just naming it can help bring awareness. Because we live in a world that rewards speed and sometimes noise, like the constant input, the opinions, the scrolling, and these days kind of doom scrolling. And some of my clients, like I said, share this with me, and then we have a conversation about, okay, don't beat yourself up. This is just where you are. Everything's temporary, and you'll get yourself out of this, and I'll support you in that. So what are you going to do to change that habit? So that wisdom, that inner quiet wisdom, which doesn't typically yell and has a hard time, beating out the rest of the noise. It kind of whispers at you. But so Liz, what practices or routines help you get quiet enough to actually hear yourself?
So the biggest thing I did that I've been practicing for several months now is what people refer to as a dopamine detox. That's like the biggest game changer that has really allowed me to get more in tune with my own thoughts and feelings. So I used to finish working, hop in bed, doom scroll for at least 2 hours. I would doom scroll while doing pretty much anything. And I'm not going to lie, it's one of the most difficult things to wean off of, but it's one of the most rewarding. So I actually do not go, and this is kind of weird to say because, a lot of times you're trying to check competition or you're trying to stay active on social media. But I actually do not go on social media unless I'm scheduling posts or responding to comments. And I only do that once a day, and I only do it from my desktop computer now. I actually deleted Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Studio, everything from my cell phone and my iPad. So unless I'm in my office and I have time carved out on my calendar to focus on content and, responses to comments, I actually don't scroll on my phone anymore. I don't listen to music in my headphones at the gym. I just work out with no headphones on. I just stare out the window or look at the clock or whatever it is. So dopamine detox, there's lots of information about it online, but I would say that is arguably one of the best commitments I've made to myself. I got back into reading. I got back into quiet time, and it really helped that frazzled feeling go away so that I could actually have that kind of calm, cool, collected feeling enough that I was prepared to actually sit and do some of that intuitive listening and actually kind of, they're very interrelated to me.
That's amazing, Liz. Like that, even the earbuds listening to music at the gym. I see people running or walking or hiking or going to the gym and doing that kind of stuff. And they don't, it's sure. Okay. I love music too. I'm taking salsa dancing 4 times a week right now. That said, wearing earbuds like that, you're literally tuning out the rest of the world. This is kind of the opposite of what we're talking about, right? But it's allowing yourself to just be present. Yes. And to be with other people, even though you might not be interacting with them, you're in a place with other people, present to what you're doing for your body versus being distracted about the music that you're listening to. And then people might say, well, I need it. That's something to look at too. Do you? because how did we function before earbuds came out or headphones came out? I mean, I used to play outside in the street when I was a kid, and we didn't have a big, music. We might have a boom box back in the day, but it's just such an interesting, distracting world right now. So something else, speaking of distraction, so when you felt overwhelmed or distracted, how do you discern between external pressure and internal truth?
Yeah, I think the only way you can really do that is to get rid of the external pressure. And I would argue that a lot of the external pressure that we experience comes from social media, because the algorithm is going to serve you things that are in your same industry for the most part. And so you're constantly looking at competitors. I mean, in my case, for example, with nails, if I go on my Nail Hub Instagram account and I just start scrolling for stuff, all I will see are what other people are posting and doing. And whether or not, some people will say, oh, well, I enjoy that, and it's kind of a way to escape and decompress. But I would argue that the subconscious effect that it has is just constantly telling you, look at what other people are doing that you're not doing. And so it creates almost this like subconscious FOMO, or
Yeah.
unnecessary level of competition in my mind. And it's kind of like what we were talking about with the experts, the too many cooks in the kitchen, the people telling you how you should do your business and how you should evolve. To me, when you have so much stimulus and you're filling every quiet moment in your brain with scrolling, binge watching shows, music, whatever it might be, how are you going to have the quiet moments to daydream or to think about, have some imagination about what you want to do with your business or your personal life, or both? You know what I mean? So I started to realize I was filling every single possible free moment with something. And I started to actually go, okay, let's back up and see if we can eliminate some of that, and what might come to the surface if it's not, all those spaces aren't being filled.
Right. And that too, it's, let's be honest. Social media and these platforms, there was even a documentary about it. I forget what it's called, but they're built to capture your attention. Even ChatGPT, the reason it's so complimentary is that's their way of getting you to stay engaged on the platform and to utilize it more and to rely on it more. And it's just another, although I use it too for my marketing and writing stuff, and it's accelerated me getting some stuff done. I will often, when it says, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? How about this? I'll be like, thank you, but no, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah.
Not right now. Or I just ignore it and I'll just hit a thumbs up or, do nothing. It's really interesting. Really quickly, I also want to say hello to Dennis. It's so good to have you here and see your name. And let's see what else. There was a comment here I wanted to, anyway, scrolling. Scrolling is it's an addiction. It is an absolute addiction. Okay. Last question on this topic. How can leaders and business owners start creating more quiet moments in their day? Kind of like what you've been doing, even when life feels loud.
So another thing that I had deprioritized for years was my personal health. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can also relate to this. So just like I mentioned earlier, how I lived on literally Coca-Cola and processed food for almost a decade. It was pretty bad. Again, I think depending on where you start in your journey, you have the benefit of youth, right? So when you're 25 and you're grinding, you're able to get away with not eating right, not sleeping right, stimulant use, whatever you want to talk about. But to me, what really changed the game was I started to realize that the deprioritizing my health was actually having a direct effect on my mental clarity, on my ability to feel motivated, on my ability to actually be able to grind to the level that I wanted to. So at the same time of looking at kind of this mental and emotional alignment and really digging deep on all the things that you and I worked on together, I also committed to actually prioritizing my health. And I had to hire a trainer because I would never stick with going to the gym if I didn't have someone holding me accountable. It's just, I know myself well enough to know that. So I allocated budget. I took budget from something else that I was spending on. I allocated budget to a trainer because you're not just going to come up with the money out of thin air. And I did the same thing with you. To me, it's about shifting priorities and then allocating budget to that priority. And that is something I committed to probably shortly after you and I started working together.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So the working out thing, and I know this is kind of cliche. Some of these things that I'm saying are, again, you could say, oh, that's so cliche, to kind of have that epiphany moment and start working out and having a trainer. And, and also some people get frustrated when I say things like this because a lot of people will go, oh, well, who has the budget and the time for that? I get it. We can make excuses all day long about how we don't have the money or the time to do these things. But at the end of the day, I realized that if I didn't prioritize my health, I would get to a point where I physically wasn't able to do the things that I needed to do or wanted to do. And I also started to realize that everything they tell you about working out, not at first, because I'm not going to lie, starting out is terrible, but it does give me mental clarity because not only does it actually help me with my energy levels, it helps me feel better. But at the end of the day, it's an hour of time that I carve out to do nothing but something for myself.
Yeah.
And this is also something that I wrote a note down about this because to me, a lot of people will talk about carving out time from the perspective of self-care, right? So there's so much stuff about self-care out there. And I always see the typical stuff because I'm in the beauty industry. Self-care often is like bubble baths or eating ice cream or, whatever. And there's a lot of confusion between self-indulgence and self-care.
Yes, that's a great distinction.
Yeah. I got very hyper aware about the self-indulgence propaganda because self-indulgence is very much like social media where it's a short-lived moment. It's just a dopamine rush, and there's no shade on anyone, but there's a lot of pressure on us to be self-indulgent and to buy all kinds of accessories and foods and pleasure, things that are going to give us those moments of self-care. And what I found was that really wasn't what was providing self-care. It was providing just quick little blips of what I thought was going to make me feel better. Could be as simple as a super expensive dinner out, something like that. You go to the nicest steakhouse in town, have 3 martinis. I mean, to me, that is also self-indulgence. It's not self-care. So I also sat down and I said, okay, if I want to be able to do the things I want to do, and I want to focus on my mental clarity, my health, I want to feel better, I want to think better, and I want to also carve out true space in my day, then to me, the thing that I came up with was working out. And so that for me helped. I mean, it literally relates to everything else we've already talked about because having your body feel better, also getting out some of that anxiety, because I sit in front of a computer, no joke, for probably 10 to 14 hours a day. I create content. I'm always filming. I'm always on my computer. So I need to move. And as human beings, we need to move. We need to get energy out of our bodies. And that was something that I realized I needed to commit to. And it completely changed all of the other abilities for me to actually be able to calm down, be able to hear myself, be able to really feel like I was taking care of myself, which also makes you feel like your number one priority, which we should be. So all of it came together for me after I started doing that.
I love it. Well, yeah, and the thing was, you made that decision, right?
Yes.
It's being decisive, like precise and decisive. And then when you make it a priority, like like Wendy said, you'll act on it because you're saying, hey, this is important to me, and I understand why this is important to me. And it's funny because I studied salsa dancing like 7-8 years ago when I lived in Seattle, and life happens, the world changes, COVID happened. I moved around a couple times, and where I'm living now, somebody invited me to their salsa class. I think it was last year. And I did do a couple of drop-ins, but it didn't click yet. And then a couple months ago, I thought to myself exactly what you just said. I'm so tired of sitting in front of my computer for for 12 to 14 hours a day. Yes, I'm doing stuff for my business. Yes, it makes me feel productive. And who else is going to do it unless I hire somebody to do it? And sometimes it's better for us to do it because it's more personalized and it has our unique touch to it, right? All that to say, when I gave myself, weirdly, why do we need permission? But I gave myself permission to go take a class. And it's like, why didn't I do this sooner? Right. And now I just signed up for a second class and I'm dancing 4 times a week. And I went last night and I'm going again tomorrow night and Thursday night and Saturday night. And it brings me so much joy and I get my body moving. I don't think about what's happening in the world. So it's such a win-win all around.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it is an interesting thing that I started to feel guilty about taking any time away from my computer because, again, your to-do list seems to grow and grow and grow. And I remember almost finding a time period where I felt jealous of even my spouse. My spouse would go off and like run errands or like try to help out or go do his workouts or whatever. And I'd still be glued to my computer. And I remember it just made me feel so weird because at the end of the day, when you're deprioritizing yourself, what kind of message are you telling yourself? I mean, how can you be motivated when you're basically telling yourself, the master behind all of the business stuff that you create, that you're literally on the bottom of the priority list? And that was an epiphany I had where I was like, why am I on the bottom of the priority list? I mean, I'm the one that runs this thing, so I should be at the top. And it actually feels really good. You get your confidence back. You get, that feeling of just being connected with your mind, with your body, having time to daydream, having time to zone out. I think that's really how you get to those spaces where even if it's a half hour, even if it's 15 minutes, whatever, if you can have time just to yourself that actually long term is going to add benefits to your life, you're going to feel so much better. And working out, honestly, is one of the time periods where I come up with some of my best ideas for content because I'm not in front of something. I'm not being filled with something. I'm actually able to just go off, and really zone out. And it is one of those things where I now feel like it's one of the best places for me to get ideas.
I love that. I've noticed that too. Sometimes I get the best ideas either right when I go to bed or first thing in the morning or when I'm in the shower. I don't know why that is. Yeah. Or when I take my dog on a walk, right? And the importance of giving ourselves the space to, like you said, practice using our imagination and being playful about it while we're not distracted even by our own work is really monumental. Okay, so let's move into the last topic around this whole theme. Yep, clearing out mental clutter. So here's a question for you, audience. So what's one thing that you could mentally declutter right now? Something that you can let go of that's been taking up too much space. Just write it down for yourself. Or if you want to share it in the chat, share it in the chat with us. So the thing is we all carry mental clutter. I carry it too. I have unmade decisions. I have unfinished to-dos. You see my list of to-dos. Other people's expectations. And it's like trying to think clearly when your brain has like 27 browser tabs open, which admittedly, I probably have more than 27 tabs open right now and like 3 or 4 different browsers going. But okay, so Liz, what does mental clutter look like for you and how have you learned to recognize it sooner?
So mental clutter for me personally has always been overwhelming. I'm a very hypervigilant person. So that means I notice every single speck of dust, every single thing that's out of place. And I'm sure, there's a lot of people that can also relate to that. So I not only have that, but then add on, your personal thoughts and feelings and your business to-do list and all of that can get very, very overwhelming. And you also taught me something about this. I used to pride myself as an excellent multitasker.
Oh, yes.
And I would do 5 bazillion things all at the same time. And arguably, to my credit, I will say I did them well. But the cost of thinking that multitasking is a true way to get stuff done actually means that you aren't in any one of those things. You're not in the moment with any one of those objectives. To me, what I found was it created this moment of just frazzled blur, time flying by. Maybe you got 80% of them done. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you just started everything and then you have a whole bunch more unfinished projects or open browser tabs. And so I think that lie or that myth about multitasking is something that I really had to dig deep on, because it's something that in society is encouraged. I think it's also an identity factor for a lot of women. Like, it's a joke about how women are really great at multitasking because we have to do so many things for our families and our businesses and for ourselves and all of that. And that is one of the things that I really had to let go of. And I had to actually say, I'm not going to actually run my life as a multitasker. I'm going to actually sit down, prioritize, come up with an actual execution plan. And if things need to get removed from the execution list, then I need to actually do that instead of trying to pride myself on keeping 50 bazillion things going at the same time and then just getting more frazzled and burned out. And then ultimately, again, all the things that we previously talked about, motivation goes down, burnout goes up. And those fleeting moments of feeling like, yay, I'm a multitasker. I mean, really, it doesn't really go anywhere. So you
Well,
taught me a lot about that.
oh, I'm so glad. Well, and then people wonder why they're so exhausted, right?
Yes.
And I think where that's coming from, it's really funny because I remember learning that when I was in my early 20s, a long time ago, where, oh, women are so much better at tasking. Well, really, are we? I mean, yes, like if we have to do or be aware of multiple things happening at the same time, we can train ourselves to be multi-focused in general. But I think part of it has to do with the reticular activation in your brain, of being, psychologically aware of something once you do have it become more conscious for yourself, and the comparison of how men in general are single focused. And that's actually a real strength of theirs, because when they're very single focused on something, when anybody is very single focused on anything, that's where you really can get stuff done and tune out the distraction, which is exactly what we're talking about. So, I think that whole thing it's a myth, and it's counterproductive to thinking that we can do that all the time without, like you said, burning out. So, so what is a way that you reset or declutter when your mind feels noisy or overloaded? I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit already, but if you have any other thoughts about it.
The other thing that I really had to practice, and again, when we worked together, one of the things that was very, I guess, one of the things that was very impactful for me was talking about how no is something that I need to learn how to say. No is something that I often don't say because, again, when you get into the grind, you are in the mode of trying to grow your business. You don't often say no because you want to be open to every single opportunity, every single time that you could get a new client, make more money, do more, get in front of more things. And I, for probably a 5 or 6 year span, didn't say no to a single thing that I got asked to do. So learning how to say no, and that no is a complete sentence. I know people have said that before, but you don't have to have a reason why you're going to say no. You can come up with very diplomatic ways to say no, but at the end of the day, being able to say no is one of the biggest ways I have decluttered my mentality, my to-do list, everything. And honestly, I will be fully transparent. Some of the biggest areas that I had to start saying no to were within my own family. Because you feel pressured after you're done working and doing all of these opportunities for revenue then you also have maybe your parents are asking you to do something for them, or your brother or your kids or your husband or whatever it might be. And I really had to start asking myself, is this truly something that I want to take on? And if it's not, then it's a no. And, to be clear, I'm not talking about being entitled. I'm not talking about, oh, I shouldn't have to do something and that kind of mentality. If you're, in my mind, if you're a well experienced entrepreneur who has been grinding, who has proved your work ethic, who doesn't say no to anything. I mean, we're not capricious people. I mean, we're literally like, I feel like we've proven ourselves. We have multiple battle scars. No one's going to question your dedication to them or to others or to your business at this point. And that was something that I started to sit with. And I said, why am I so afraid of saying no? Like, what's the judgment that I think is going to come from that? Because at the end of the day, I'm not an entitled person. I actually do way more than most people that I know. So if I legitimately want to say no to something, no matter what it is or who it's coming from, then I should be confident in that decision. And that is how I also keep my mental list to a degree that I can actually handle, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense, because by saying no to certain things, it keeps you, it maintains your ability to keep your priorities straight. And when you say no to something, you can say yes to something else. And it doesn't mean you have to fill it that time with something else. Sometimes it just means I'm saying yes to giving myself 15 minutes to go walk outside and ground myself, get some fresh air. Again, it doesn't mean you have to fill it with something else just because you're saying no to it. But again, it has to do with the practice of discernment, of discerning how you're using your time, because there are only so many hours in the day. Ideally, you're getting good sleep, like we've talked about. And, how much of it are you working? How much of it are you spending with yourself or with loved ones, taking care, doing the level of self-care, or just chilling and doing nothing? I mean, how rare is it to have that ability to do too? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's very tempting because, again, if you only have so many hours every day, a lot of times you will fall. Like when I first started this, I mean, it's important for people listening to this to understand that this isn't going to be something that you're going to automatically be able to do tomorrow if you decide to do it. I still make mistakes when it comes to following, what I've set out to do for myself and for my business. And old habits need to be replaced by new habits, which you and I have talked about many times. And so oftentimes, if you're not actually replacing the habit, you'll just fall back into what you did before because you know it and it's very comfortable to live there. So that is something that the not filling those spaces, for example, actually prioritizing eating breakfast. It might sound really silly, but I used to go until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon before I would eat a meal. And so even carving out the time and not allowing myself to fill that time slot with something else. Same thing goes for like my gym routine. I, made the mistake a few times of going, oh yeah, I'll do that, during my normal workout window that I have on certain days of the week. And then realizing, no, like I need to say no. I need to reschedule that. I need to move that to a better time window. And if I ultimately am feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to say, no, thank you. Thanks for thinking of me, but no. And I think that is something that, just not, like you said, not filling those spaces with something else is ultimately how you're going to get to a place where you do feel like you're actually rejuvenated. You do feel like you have that time to actually think about things. And I also think that's why a lot of us lack self-awareness these days, is because we don't have that time to actually take care of ourselves and think about our own inner monologue. We just fill the silence with all kinds of stimulus. And then we wonder why we're not aware of what we're doing and how we got to 8 p.m. and we haven't even eaten or taken care of ourselves.
Well, and speaking of self-awareness, before I go to what I want to ask you about next, I want to quickly mention about habits. Because what was really helpful to me that I learned a long time ago, which I now instill in working with my clients, is when it comes to brain science, and we are very habitual beings. Even emotionally, emotions can be habitual. But we can start a new habit anytime we want. But when it comes to an old habit that you want to discontinue, you can't just stop it. It's very difficult to do that. And the best way to do it is to replace it with something else. But it's got to be done with intention and purpose. So, in terms of self-awareness, what role does self-awareness play in staying focused and productive without burning out?
Well, I would say self-awareness is everything, to be honest. It's one of the most difficult things to maintain because it's something that is not encouraged anymore. Just societally, I think it's one of those things where, again, we're just so overstimulated. We're so inundated with information and, news and expert opinions and to-do lists and friends, family, whatever, that it's very difficult. I'll use the analogy also because a lot of my, again, another cliche is you get to a certain stage in your life where a lot of your friends are going through divorce. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's very much like that, where I see people, we are bound to change. We are constantly evolving. I am not the same Liz that I was when I was 20 years old. And I think it's naive to think that I would be. But because we get stuck in these patterns of behavior, these habits, it's very easy to have 20 years go by and you haven't even revisited who you are, what you think, what your priorities are, what your goals are. And that's also, in my opinion, how you get distant on relationships because you just haven't checked in and you've gotten busy and you've, been playing a role, whether it be the provider, the nurturer, whatever it might be. And the same thing happens with our businesses, where you get into this role of I just execute tasks, or I just do this, or I just do that. And so if you're not actually having those moments of checking in, which is truly what self-awareness is, then it stands to reason that you're going to get very disconnected. You're going to get very just kind of into this weird pattern of behavior and you don't even realize what you're doing. Kind of like how we can drive down the freeway and we realize, oh my gosh, I haven't even really been focusing on driving. I've just been kind of like up in my head zoning out.
Yeah, it's almost like
right? Like you go by your exit, or like you can drive a couple miles. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm driving. Like I haven't even been like realizing I'm driving right now, because you get so used to driving and you're so good at it that you can literally zone out while you drive. And I think the same thing happens with our behaviors, which is you get so good at doing something that you can basically do it without thinking about it. But the trick is, if you're not checking in, you're not thinking about it once in a while, you start to lose that self-awareness. And I also think that being honest with yourself about your behaviors, like for example, one of mine is, I know that if I don't actually have someone keeping me accountable when I'm developing a new behavior or habit, I know I won't do it. I won't do it long enough to actually replace the habit, create the new behavior. And so knowing that about myself and being honest with myself about that has helped me actually implement a lot of the things I wanted to implement, instead of starting something, giving up on it, feeling bad about it, then not returning to it because you're embarrassed or, whatever. And so, that self-awareness and that kind of checking in, I think, is what keeps us aligned with everything else around us. And also make sure that you don't wake up at 85 and you're like, how did I get here? What did I do with my life?
Yeah, it's the consistency and the repetition. That's what's super important, to just keep repeating it and doing it consistently. And it's funny, doing this work with people sometimes is really interesting, because when I first started 20 years ago, I was doing more general life coaching. And the types of coaching I've done over the years has changed. So I did like life coaching and relationship coaching. And then at one point I was doing teenager coaching, which really was about coaching the parents. Sorry, no, thank you. But right. So, and then it evolved into what I'm doing now. But, even like there was a division president of a big box construction company that I was working with. And I was working with him one-to-one, as well as doing team coaching with him and his team once a month. And at one point we were talking about values. And he said to me the following session, he said, that conversation about values, it's making me realize that I haven't thought about my own personal values. And he said, me and my wife right now are talking about the vacations that we want to take, because we plan them kind of in advance every year, like 6 months to a year in advance. And he said, we haven't even thought about, he's like, I haven't talked about my own values. And he said, I don't even know if I can maybe guess what hers are, but I haven't overtly asked her what they are. And then, and so, and then he thought, oh, I could apply this to how we're making conscious decisions about the vacations that we're taking, about where do we want to go and when do we want to go? And do we want to go by ourselves? Do we want to take our kids? Do we want to go with family? Do we want to go with friends? And I was like, yeah, cool, And so I just suggested that he do this exercise, and it was really interesting. So it all connects.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So to start to wrap up, and audience, I've got one more question for you. What is one thing that your instinct or intuition has been trying to tell you that you've been too busy to hear? So
good question.
So apart from that, Liz, I know, because I know how you are, and you're so thoughtful about how you engage in things. So I know you wrote some things down. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover around this topic that we haven't addressed yet? It's okay if not.
I think, and it also has to do with the question you just asked, which is, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One theme that really came up with us working together, and even like our conversation today, is truly about being okay with letting go of quote unquote failures. That was something that I used to really harbor a lot. And I used to see things as failures. Again, that good old black or white 1-0 thinking. It's either a success or a failure. There's nothing in between. Right. And so when I started to actually think about the things that I had categorized as failures, it actually allowed me to dig in a little bit more, think about all of the different facets of that project or that outcome or whatever it was. And what actually came up for me was learning. My intuition was telling me that I can trust myself. So because I was categorizing things as either a failure or a success, the times I failed, it broke trust with my intuition, because those were times where I said, this is something I went out on a limb. I tried something, and I'm a very progressive thinker in a lot of ways in my industry. And so I'm always experimenting, and I'm always wanting to try something new and move everything forward. And a lot of times you're going to face failure in those objectives. And so because I have faced failure in some of those things, or I thought it was failure, and I categorized it that way, it broke trust with what I would consider my intuition, because my gut told me I wanted to do this. My gut told me it was a great idea. And because it didn't turn out the way that I had anticipated, I categorized it as a failure, which meant that I didn't trust my intuition anymore. So to me, being able to actually think more deeply about whether something is a true failure, or actually getting rid of that definition and just going through more of a postmortem analysis and just thinking about what are all of the different facets to this, what are all the different outcomes, and then realizing that I can trust my intuition and my gut, that I do have great ideas. It just might be circumstance. It might have been, hey, that one piece wasn't, done appropriately, or maybe I chose the wrong person for that part of the project. I needed to actually get back to trusting my gut so that I could continue to do that and go forward, instead of getting frozen and being like, oh, I don't have any good ideas anymore. So that was something that really came up for me during, our talk about the conversation today, but also while we were working together, and also, kind of came up for me again while you asked that question to your audience.
Beautiful. Yeah, that proof and evidence and trusting. I mean, I'm human. I go through it too. Because none of us are going to get out of this life without making at least one bad decision. I could probably count the many bad decisions that I've made. And it's also with consciousness and intention, taking a look at all the good and right decisions that you make. So anyway, this has been so wonderful to have you here, and I always appreciate your candor, and reminding us that slowing down isn't a weakness, and then that's where wisdom really happens for us. So before we go, how can people find you?
Oh, well, I am literally known as at the Nail Hub across every single social media platform you can think of. So you guys can find me on, all the major ones. And then my most recent business is at Attain Cosmetics. I personally run both accounts. And for anyone interested in, chatting about entrepreneurial life or interested in gel nail care, I'm your girl. But yeah, I really encourage people, honestly, as someone who's worked with you, I want to turn this back on you because I think you have been such an inspiration and an instrumental person in my own evolution and my business's evolutions that I will hope that people listening to this will use this as, proof that what you're doing and what you're putting out into the ether and what you do with your clientele is so much more than I think any logistical objective that any entrepreneur could ever come up with. It's so much more than that. And you have truly helped me turn both of my businesses around, including my personal life. So I really thank you for that. And if anybody, again, wants to reach out, ask me about my experience working with you or anything, I'm more than happy to do that. And you guys can reach out to me on my social accounts as well.
Oh, that means the world to me. And people listening, I did not ask her to do that. I didn't pay her to do this.
No, you did not.
That is beautiful. And so, okay, so those listening, if you're in a place where you know that you're ready to alchemize your burnout into purpose or pivot into what's next, let's talk. So anyway, all right. Thanks, Liz. And for those that are listening, a couple different things to do here. Sign up for my newsletter. This is where I share reflections, tools, and updates for leaders and business owners who are ready to grow with intention. Also, follow my business page on LinkedIn or on Facebook of I Love My Life Coaching, and Jesse is including those links for me. Thank you, Jesse. And also for upcoming lives or other podcasts that are coming out. So to alleviate any confusion, so Alchemize with Alanna are my lives that are then, yes, recorded and accessible and integrated into my podcast, which is Defy Limits. And again, I am Alanna Levinson with Alchemize with Alanna, where we turn messy into magic. So thanks again for being here, and we'll see you next time.